Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Romanian bred, Taiwan-based Talida Van Boxstael, founder of Light of Key, a Palo Santo company that empowers seekers to start and deepen their spiritual practice by bringing mystical Palo Santo to the modern spiritual seeker from around the world. Hi, Talida, and welcome to Curito Connects.
Hi, Jenn. Thank you for having me. It is so humbling to hear the introduction, always.
So before I begin, I just wanted to give our mutual friend Lydia Chang from episode 42, the director of Flow Retreat Hualien, a shout out for introducing Talida and I almost a year ago today. So what an honor it is to have you here with us to share your journey of taking spirituality off the pedestal and how it has allowed you to link your past and present and integration into your life now and the business you created with Light of Key. So within this journey, Talida wants to remind us that we must trust life through each change and phases we go through and the labels that come with it. So without further ado, I will let Talida introduce herself to our listeners today and share her journey.
Well, it has been such a journey for me to actually reflect on this. And thank you so much for giving me that opportunity, because before this recording this with you, I I obviously looked at my life and I obviously reflected on the decisions that I made and on all the opportunities that life just gave me. But I never really sat down to link the dots between, all the things that have shaped me into who I am today. So thank you for that. Um, so I have lived many, many lives and many versions of myself over the last 4 decades, more than 4 decades. The current chapter of my life is that I am an expat mom of 3 living in Taiwan, in Taipei City. And this is the place where I have founded Light of Key. Light of Key is a Palo Santo spiritual tools boutique. We do small spiritual tools such as mala beads and Palo Santo amulets and chargers and all amazing things. And I'm also the founder of Palo Santo Eastern Company, which is a Palo Santo incense brand that serves mainly in the United States, bringing deluxe Palo Santo incense that is made in Taiwan, that is produced here with Peruvian Palo Santo wood, and we bring into the US. And yeah, this is in a nutshell a little bit about myself now.
So that's the chapter we are in now. And if you could
Yes.
do like a little Cliff Note version to share with us some of the previous chapters, that like you were saying when we
Mm,
first chatted a few minutes ago, where you said it gave you time to reflect on the different chapters and how they all link together.
yeah.
If you could share with us from your humble beginnings and kind of like give us like a quick reel.
Sure. The highlight reel. Okay. So I just want to say before I start with the highlight reel and where I started is that I ended up here just by taking the next right step and saying yes to things that felt to me like a hell yes, even though at that time they might have not made any sense intellectually in terms of decision making. So, how my life looks now, what I just said where I am right now, is just the details that were filled in after some key hell yeses that I said to life. So, to come back to the real beginnings, I was born in Romania, and I have always had this fascination with the mystery of the unknown. Um, my very, very first memory felt like I was just waking up into this life. And it was a happy memory. I remember just being on probably 3 years old, playing on my grandmother's knees. And that felt to me like it's almost like waking up in the morning. It's just like I have immersed into this life. And I have always wondered and asking myself big, big questions that were probably not at all age appropriate, such as what is the point of my life? Why am I here? How does this work? I always had a fascination with understanding not necessarily the big meaning of life, but the small things of making sense of my existence and everybody else's existence in that process. Um, I was wondering if the voice in my head is something only I have, or was it something that everybody else has? Um, and looking back, I never asked those questions out loud, actually, because and I want to think it's probably because of my upbringing and the way that things were normalized back then. But I don't think it's that at all. I just think I was more of an internal processor of how everything worked. It was more inside of me because once you start asking those questions out loud, you would then take those answers and make them your own, while not asking them out loud allows you to actually explore the pleasure of finding the answer yourself. So I've always had the big questions, and I guess that's what you could say was the start of my spiritual path. But because of the environment that I was brought up in, and because of how boxed it was, and how it's almost Romania is very it's a non-diverse environment. So everybody, the vast majority of people, they have a similar life experience. The vast majority of people look the same. The vast majority of people have one religion. The vast majority of people, we just don't have a whole lot of diversity. And so I just followed into the steps that were laid in front of me in that environment. And for me, that meant um, looking for spirituality in religion. So those were my first steps into trying to find some answers about the big life and the big picture. And that worked for a while. But then, then life took me in different places. So when I was 23, I got a job in the Middle East. I moved to Abu Dhabi to become a flight attendant. And so um, everything in my life completely shifted. My environment shifted, the opportunities for me to experience diversity changed dramatically. And so I I got an opportunity to see the world bigger than just the town and the country where I was born in. And that completely shifted everything for me. So that was, I would say, the first big decision of saying a hell yes to something that was a domino that informed everything else that followed. Um,
Mm.
in my aviation job, my spiritual practice transformed and transmuted into personal development, uh, motivation, leadership, going down the route of um, what I would now call um, success, probably like outside success in terms of doing well at the job that I had, being promoted, doing better, assuming a leadership role, and so forth. But looking back, that too was a spiritual practice because spirituality is about what we cannot see, smell, touch. It's about who we are at our core and about just finding better versions or different versions of that of who we are and creating a new story. And so personal development was like the centerpiece of my 20s. and somehow reading everything and trying to some even attempting to change my past by recreating a present that looked different, drastically different than the environment in which I was raised. And later on, as I was entering my 30s, my spiritual practice morphed into law of attraction and manifestation and subconscious programming. And in my 30s, before I became a mother, I it went around yoga and meditation and mindfulness. And as I became a mother, it bled into healing childhood trauma and doing everything better than my ancestors, and a lot of healing that came out of it. And fast forward to today, when I started my Palo Santo brand, and actually it started when I moved to Taiwan, my spiritual practice has shifted more into energy. And because Taiwan is such a fantastic place where energy work and unseen and mystery is normalized, um, I actually had the opportunity, and I felt the freedom to just come out of my broom closet and really be weird with things that I would have been very self conscious about before. So that's in a nutshell
Mm. Wow,
the
that
story of my spiritual journey.
journey. Well, you really, really gave it a lot of thought, because I think
I really
this
did.
this might be the first conversation I had where someone actually uh, consciously broke up the different chapters that they've gone through in their life and viewed the different spirituality development in categorized in that way. So I was taking notes as you were talking, but I loved how you was able to go from one phase to another and see it
Yeah.
from that angle. And I wanted to ask if you could share with us during those different, I think maybe there was like 5 chapters there, if you could share, maybe like give examples of moments where an incident happened for you, or a decision making moment happened for you, or whatever scenario, that
Mm.
then you applied these spiritual practices, as we are calling it today, to help you kind of overcome that obstacle. So, I mean, because
Mm.
sometimes we can see it as an obstacle, right? So, maybe for example, like, what you were saying back home, it was more like a religious interaction,
Approach.
and
Yeah.
then when you decided to leave hometown where your upbringing was, and then what, maybe there was a moment there that changed that direction for you, where then when you went to Abu Dhabi and worked, um, it's almost like all those questions you had growing up almost exponentiated more,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're like, wow,
Absolutely.
the world is like, whoa, it's like this.
Yeah.
And then learning new things, and developing your career in the aviation industry, the different professional development, as you were saying, how that coming from a spiritual angle, just I
Mm.
think it'd be very, I would love to hear you share your own personal experiences and how those
Yeah.
apply, because I think, like you said, each section, there is a tap in that when you
Oh,
use that
absolutely.
viewpoint to look at these situations and scenarios, it's all same but different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like when people say, oh, spiritual practice, you know
Yeah.
and mainstream world we live in, people think, oh, that's like the woo woo stuff. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's yoga, it's like energy, those, but
Yeah.
actually, as you've broken it down, everyone does have it. It's just maybe we don't use the word spiritual practice, but it's
Exactly.
self growth. It's
Yeah.
how to improve yourself.
Yeah.
So,
I think, well, it was very, very beneficial for me to actually define what spirituality meant for me. And to be honest, it has been a quest for many, many years to define what does it mean? What does spirituality actually means? Because yes, we see the yoga, we see the Palo Santo, we see the chanting, we see everybody doing a version of spirituality, and we we're looking at the process, but not like what's underneath the process. And what's underneath the process, in my opinion, is that making having the intention, and that intention being backed by actions. So it's spirituality is not just like, ooh, I want to be spiritual. No, it's actually in the actions that you're taking on a daily basis of living in a state of chronic satisfaction for no other reason other than because you decided it would be so. And how that looks like is just very, very different for each one of us. That state of chronic satisfaction with who we are, not what we do, or not because of our job or because of our um, whatever it is, whatever we put on that list of achievements that we put on, after our names, right? Um, that's the whole purpose of having a spiritual practice, to feel really good, right? Like, we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it because we want to feel good, or we want to feel better, or we want to feel relief from pain, or we just want to move towards satisfaction. So those are just different stages of the spiritual journey. But at the bottom of it is just, I want to be satisfied with my life. I want to have a big, beautiful, full life that I feel I lived it well. And that's why we do all the things that we do. But those are just modalities that we employ to get there, right? Like, you don't have a spiritual practice because you burn Palo Santo, or because you can do sand salutations, or because you're chanting. You have a spiritual practice when you feel super good when you're doing it. Like, you are just full of that moment, and you feel so satisfied and so precisely where you should be because you're doing it. Sorry, I forgot your question. What was your question? You wanted me to.
No, I said, could you share with us different scenarios that you've
Okay, different
encountered
scenarios.
in those
Yes,
chapters? But actually,
absolutely.
after what you just said, I just wanted to add in,
Mm,
maybe in a more simple way, it would be like,
mm,
in those chapters when you share these scenarios, how, like, at what point in time was it that you felt that you were at full at that moment? Because that's what you were saying
mm,
earlier in regards to a spiritual practice. It's being satisfied with your life and achieving that full of that moment
yeah.
feeling. Yeah. So if you could share with us.
I actually think that everything is just like a bell curve, right? Like, it's moving up and down, and you reach a certain peak with all the versions of this spiritual practice, and then afterwards you want to move towards more. You want to move towards more evolution, because I think that's our nature. Our nature is always to seek more. There's never That's why perfection feels so rotten, because it's not the natural state of who we are. There is no end point that you achieve and that is it. That goes against everything we know about nature and about organisms, and about everything is constantly moving, constantly shifting, constantly becoming a better or more evolved version. Not better, let's not use the word better, it's too triggering. But a different shift of what has been. And perfection is just that illusion that you reach one point and that is it, right? Like,
Mm.
there's always going to be movement, there's always going to be more, there's always going to be a desire to evolve. And I believe that all unhappiness comes from trying to stop that, trying to stop that yearning for more, yearning for expansion, yearning for for evolution, for just becoming the next version of yourself, which I think is a
Mm.
lifelong, it will be a lifelong experience. But with my spiritual practice, I had the same bell curve. So things have worked really, really well. And I had a lot of satisfaction, for example, in my religious experience in my childhood. It felt like, as a kid, you feel like you're dependent. You're dependent on your parents. You're dependent on your caretakers, like people who caregivers, caretakers. How do you say that in
Mhm.
English? Whatever. People who take care of you. Um, you depend on them for everything, almost for your survival, right? Like, they have to feed you, they have to care for you, they have to love you, they have to put you to bed. And so you feel, I felt out of control. Like, I felt like there wasn't much in my control. And when the people around us are unreliable because they also have their own journeys that they're going through, and we're not going to be the center of attention of somebody else, no matter how much we want that. Nobody can give us 100% attention and experience. Our experience is self-centered. Everybody moves around with themselves at the center of the universe, and that is how it is for each one of us. So we can only be what we need from ourselves. But for me, initially, religion and the idea of a God meant I can rely on somebody who wants what's good for me. That was my idea and um, my image of this benevolent God who is. My grandmother was teaching me. I had nightmares when I was little, and so she was teaching me how to say a prayer to the angels, and that I have a guardian angel, and that everything nothing is wrong, and nothing is supposed to go wrong. There's always somebody guiding me, and so
Did it work?
my experience. Of course, when you're 5, of course it does. um, and it was a beautiful entrance into a spiritual practice, that way, from that perspective, with that level of maturity that I had then. And it worked so well until I reached the point of dogma. And then when you start going deeper into, because evolution will want you to go deeper into a subject, and going deeper into organized religion and seeing the constraints of it, and seeing the basis of unworthiness that was at the what built the religion that I was part of, at that time. And so, and the idea that we are the only ones who have it right. And that worked for a while when I was in the closed environment where everybody was like me. But the moment that I went out into the world and I entered Middle East, where people, their devotion is so powerful. The prayers are happening 5 times a day, and it's not one or two people going to the church randomly on a Sunday. It's masses of people who are worshiping and living in devotion. And I could not be witness to that and think that what I learned in my village is the only right way to do it. And the more I traveled and the more I saw the world, and I saw it's not only in the Middle East that people have devotion. I came to Asia, and then I went to temples, and I saw people how their relationship with the divine was so powerful and so, um, you could not deny it, that they too had a way to connect with a God that was not of the same making, according to the books that I was studying. And so the bell curve of religion was going down. It was downhill from there. Because if there was not for the belief that this is the only right way to do it, I would have been able to compromise and continue down the path of
Mm.
religion. But because it felt so wrong to say that everybody else is doing it wrong or incorrectly, or they are non-believers, or they will burn in hell, or whatever the stories that I was told. It felt wrong because I was in the presence of it, and I could feel their devotion, and
Mm.
I could not label that as being wrong,
Mm-hmm.
or bad. And so religion had to be kind of got lost in the process. uh,
Mm.
and so the next step for me was the things that I could really put my hands on. And for me, that was my success, my career success, my corporate success. I worked for a new airline, which is extremely. It was such an exciting part of my life, uh, working in Abu Dhabi, and because I had this yearning for more, I became very successful in moving up and getting promoted and having a really good reputation and doing really well at my job and feeling really good while doing it. And so I went up on the curve of personal development and becoming a good leader and becoming a good listener and reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, or, the classics, all the classics, Napoleon Hill. And I'm just going to have to look in my bookcase to see what was I reading back at that time, how to be a good leader, and who moved my cheese, like all those, retro um, literature that we were reading back in the early 2000s, when we didn't have social media, there was not so much on the internet. And it opened up a world for me of having sovereignty over my path. Yes, I was born in Romania. Yes, I come from a middle class family. Yes, if I stayed there, my life would have looked a certain way. But now I felt empowered to change my life and to to kind of move into a different box, which I didn't realize it was also a box, but it was a box. It was a box of success. It was a box of abundance, of wealth, of career success, of just doing things that I love doing. So um, that's how my 20s look like.
Mm.
Should I go to the next one?
Yes, because you have
Okay.
two more, three more. You have
Yes.
three more.
Sure. A few more. Uh, so career success was fantastic until it carried me, and it was amazing, and it's something that I still have inside of me, this hunger and yearning for success and for almost putting a mark in the world, and to say, I was here, I've done this, I felt so good doing it. It felt so good to do good and to feel good about my work and my contribution to the world, no matter how that looks like. I think each one of us has a version of that, whether you're giving, I don't know, you're giving yogurt in a supermarket and you're making somebody's day by giving them a free yogurt, or you whatever your work looks like. We all have that yearning of doing good and making a difference. Um, so what happened for me during the time that I was on top of my career and everything was going so well, I had I had like a really big heartbreak. I broke up with somebody, and I felt for the first time in my life, I had the opportunity to look at my relationships, to look at how I related to people. And I decided at that point that I was off the market. I would no longer date. I would not throw myself into the next relationship. I would just be by myself and figure it out. And that took me on the path of yoga, of meditation. I took a trip, a solo trip, for the first time in my life. I went to Nepal. Um, it was just, it was, looking back, I was so cute. Uh, and so, like, those little baby ducklings that for the first time are trying to figure it out how they walk in the world. And I was like, oh, but that going down that slope of personal development and knowing more about who I am, what I do, why do I think the way that I do, what are the decisions that I'm making, what drives me, those are such important questions, no matter what age you are, and no matter what stage you are in your life. And for me, everything that was came up to me during that time was yoga, meditation, getting to know a little bit that world. And it was still strange. Like, this was early 2000s. To do yoga was like you're in a cult, or you're meditating, you're crazy. And my family was still back in Romania. So it was a lonely experience because they could not relate to anything that I was doing. They had no exposure. They didn't understand anything. So we didn't have much of a I couldn't share a whole lot of what I was doing, or and who was I becoming through this process with my family
Mm.
back in Romania, because it was
How were
just too strange.
how were you first introduced to yoga and meditation? Um, like at that point when you had broken up with this person and reflected on your romantic relationships or
Yeah.
even your relationships with people, right? In general, I
Yeah.
mean, you worked in a, in the service industry, so you're
Mhm.
constantly dealing with people in general. To have that aha moment of like, oh wait, let me reflect on myself. Is it me or is it them? And then from there, thinking like, yeah, was it like someone introduced you to a yoga class? Like, at what point did you think, like, what gravitated you towards going into a yoga class
Right.
and a meditation class and
Yeah.
going, oh, yeah, okay, this practice on the mat and these asana work, uh, I leave feeling maybe like you said earlier,
Yeah.
fulfilled,
Relief.
satisfied with yourself,
Yeah.
relieved. And how did those wheels start turning for you?
Right. Well, I think this is to link back to your introduction. Um, it's about trusting that life has you and life gives you the next stone to step on, even
Yeah,
though
yeah.
you have no idea what's in front of you. Um, when I reflected back, thanks to you, at all my journey, looking back at everything, it was just a chance encounter, right? So, and I wish I could say that I was so eloquent in expressing myself to myself about, yes, I think I'm the common denominator of all my failed relationships, and I would like to reflect. None of that. I was just heartbroken. I was heartbroken. I was on the bathroom floor, full of snot and full of despair. And my flatmate, my flatmate at that time, she said, um, I'm going to this. So in Abu Dhabi at that time, most of the gyms were in hotels.
Yeah.
So she said, I'm going to this hotel and they have this new yoga teacher who is like, I don't even remember where she was from. I think half Lebanese and half Czech, from Czech Republic. And so she has this understanding of the world in a bigger way. And she's doing a yoga class. And I have never been to a yoga class. And I was still a smoker back then. So I was like, nothing to do with fitness. Like fitness was the last thing on my mind. And she said, it just feels so good. Like I feel leaner and taller when I do
Mhm.
it, she said. And I said, okay, I'll just join you because I had no boyfriend. I was depressed. I had nothing better to do than just say yes. It was not a hell yes. It was just a yes.
Sure. Sure.
Sure. But looking back at it, this is when I understand that invitation that I have received at that point. And I could have said no. And I'm sure
Mhm.
I would have received the invitation again in a different form or a different format, or I would have gotten a detour that would have taken me somewhere else along that path. But this is how it looked like. So I joined the yoga class. And for the first time, I think, in my whole life, for that 45 minutes or however long the class was, I felt that I was inhibiting my body. Like I was aware of. So this is, you have to think that this was not the world that it is today, in which everybody talks about mindfulness and being in your body and mind body relationship and the somatic workout and trauma and this and that. None of that was part of the mainstream dialogue. None of that was happening. And so it was just so new, and so it felt so good. And it was a relief that I received from all my heartbreak that I was going through at that point. And it felt like, oh, I almost get a break, from being in my head and massaging all the thoughts that I had about, oh, he did this and I did this and he did that and blah, blah, blah. It gave me a break.
Mm.
And I want to say that the meditation was deeper, but it was the same. It was the end of the
Mhm.
yoga class that the teacher said, well, we're just now going to lie down in Shavasana and just look at your breath, be aware of your breath. And I was like, oh, this was not as easy as it should have been. you know? um, and even those 5 minutes at the end of the class that is just for coming back into your senses, it was just so excruciating for me to it felt like
Mm.
it felt like I was a beginner once again at everything. And I really
Mm.
liked that. I really enjoyed feeling this is new. This is a new pathway that could be explored, and it can expand once again.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I got goosebumps just hearing you say that.
Those are called truth bumps.
Ah,
Um,
and
so yeah,
and yeah, so I then wanted to bring us back to when you mentioned, the next phase, which was motherhood. So saying yes
yeah,
to finding your now husband, life
yeah,
partner, and then
yeah,
saying yes to starting a family, giving up your career, that your successful career that you were so high on, uh,
yeah,
to then birthing children and entering motherhood and doing motherhood kind of full time.
yeah,
And you mentioned, and I think this would resonate with a lot of people too, motherhood. And now, like, kind of going back to what you were saying, a very popular term being thrown out these days is childhood trauma. So
yeah, yeah,
in a short, because I'm trying to be conscious of our time here, but just
yeah.
to in a short nutshell, can you share with us that not dialogue, but that back and forth between your experience, raising your, I mean, I don't know whether it was like through pregnancy and birthing your children and raising them, and mirroring that with your own childhood trauma, and acknowledging what was going on for yourself and
For
what
sure.
they're teaching
Yeah,
you and vice
yeah.
versa.
Okay, but just to bridge really quickly how I came from heartbreak to marriage.
Yeah.
So in that time of going down the rabbit hole of yoga and mindfulness and all of that, I stumbled upon Oprah, and Oprah still had a show, the Oprah show, I think it was called, whatever. And she had all
Mhm.
these people, and I had like cable TV, and I was going to all these destinations all over the world, including the US, so I could actually see a show when it was happening. And I stumbled across a show she made with the author of The Secret. I don't remember her name, but it was my first introduction to law of attraction and how you can somehow script the things that you want to happen, and um, you want to be you want to be the director of your life, and that felt really attractive to me at that
Mm.
point. It felt like hell to the yes. I am going to take charge of my life. I'm going to take it by the reins, and I'm going to create a life that I want to have, and allow myself to dream a life that I want to have, which was very new to me. And so, in one of those sessions, I was so excited about all of this. I was like, "This is the thing. This is it. This is the promised land." And so I wrote a paper on a piece of paper. What are the things that I want in a partner?
Mm.
It was a pendulum swing from my past relationship. Like, what kind of man do I want to be with? What kind of qualities I want him to have? How do I want him to look like? And, like the whole shebang, the whole thing, wrote it down on a piece of paper, promptly forgot about it. And a few months later, I meet this guy, and he is perfect. Like, he has everything on my paper, except the color of his eyes, which, I had to compromise. Um, you got to compromise still. And so I met this person, and he is just so different from everything that I have known before in terms of relationships. And looking back at my paper, he was exactly the person that I yearned for, the person that I wanted to have in my life, the kind of partner that I wanted to have. And so Stephen, my husband, is a product of law of attraction. This is how we managed to see each other. We met actually a few times before we finally went on a date and exchanged contacts and everything. It was such a beautiful manifestation and such a beautiful way of feeling that, yes, life will give me precisely what I need and precisely the next step, but I also get to have a say in the direction in which I want to move towards. And so
Mm.
I met him, and everything just moved really quickly from there. We got engaged really quickly. We got married really quickly. Everything was just this beautiful love story. And I still had my job for quite a bit after we got married, and we did it together, and we did long distance, and everything was perfect. But then came a time in which we both felt that this was great, and now it's time for the next step. And the next step for us had was that I would stop my job and I would join his life. I would be a guest into a life that he has built and then make that life my own. And everything afterwards again happens really quickly. Like, I got pregnant really quickly. We lived in a remote place in the center of Vietnam, in the middle of the rice field. It was so dramatic. The shift was so dramatic from the life that I had in Abu Dhabi with, I had my own apartment, I lived in a high-rise building, I had a car, I was moving around, to living in the middle of the rice field. I couldn't drive, I had no friends, there's no distractions for me other than getting pregnant, being pregnant, and that's it. So I had all of a sudden a lot of time opportunity to reflect and to go deeper into things that were interesting for me. Things like subconscious programming and hypnosis and Tony Robbins and things like that. So that's what I started doing back then. And I had my first daughter, and then really quickly after, I got pregnant again, and I was pregnant with twins. So in the span of 3 years, I had 3 children under the age of 3, and I was on my knees. I was so overwhelmed by everything. I was tired. I was triggered. I was hormonal. I felt fat. I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like so unqualified for my role as a mother. And so that's when I went really deep into meditation, because I could not function otherwise. I needed a practice. I remember I was feeding my babies like 4 a.m. I had the twins. Stephen was with our oldest, and he was taking care of her, and I was downstairs with the twins, and I fed them, and it was 4 a.m. and I couldn't sleep anymore. And it was the moments that the house was silent and I could just make a cup of tea and just be for a moment. And that's what I started doing. And that's when my meditation practice, my real meditation practice, actually started, from desperation, actually, and from just being so overwhelmed. And to come back to your mention of childhood trauma, which is such a big word and such a hip conversation to have right now, my personal opinion might not be the most popular. It's quite an unpopular belief that I now have about childhood trauma. I thought of my experience as a child for most of my life and related it to me being the center of my experience, the center of my universe, and my parents somehow failing me, either because of the birth order. I was the oldest and they couldn't give me all the attention that I needed, either by not having the means to support my dreams, or I blamed my mother for taking off when I was 15 because she died. She had a stroke and she died. I had a lot of stories that I have created around why I felt not, I don't want to say bad or wrong, but why I felt the way that I did and why my inner dialogue was my inner dialogue. I put that on my parents. And since becoming a mother, and somehow I made up the story that it all happened because I was bad, and therefore my parents treated me that way because of something that I have done. I could have done better. I could have been better. I could have be I don't know, I could have studied more. I could have been a more obedient child. I could have been more successful. I could have stayed where I was. I could have married a Romanian man. I could have done this. I constructed this entire story, right, of disappointment, and I was the center of that scene. I was there,
Mm,
and it happened to me because I was bad or I was not okay. And, all these people around me did me wrong. And that
yeah.
was my story for a really long time. And then when I had kids, when I had my own kids, I realized that my experience with my kids, even though I loved them so much and they were everything, and I would have died for them and I would have lived for them, I would have done anything for them, I realized that my experience with my kids was still from the point of me being the center of my universe. And that's when I realized, holy shit. So my parents behaved the way that they behaved just because that was their experience. It had nothing to do with me, because we are each individuals that move around with ourselves at the center of everything. And so I could no longer put anything on them. I had to put it on myself, and to know that whatever has happened in my past, in my childhood, in with my parents, they were just doing life with themselves at the center of it, and I was just a supporting character. And I can only be the main character of my own story. And so I get to rewrite my past. And that has been the most healing journey that I have been on. And I think for everybody who has kids, it's an ongoing journey, because you have highs and lows. You have the babyhood when you're so tired and so confused and you don't know what's going on with yourself or your life or your child. Then you have toddlerhood, in which it's madness, it's a madhouse for so many years, and then it gets better and it becomes so good. And it's so good to have kids that are a bit older, but then they become teenagers, and then they are finding themselves all over again. And so it's never it's their journey, and they are responsible for their journey, and you're responsible for your own. This is what I have learned
Mm.
learned from motherhood. And I'm so grateful that I got to do motherhood just to learn this. It's all worth it. All worth it. And so, yeah.
So
Um,
many,
so many.
so many good pointers
Yeah.
in this last few minutes
Yeah.
conversation here. Um, I know we're short on time, but you've shared so many wonderful points, I think, in terms of spiritual path, your
Yeah.
own journey, your own experiences. And I do feel like many people can relate to the different chapters in your storyline here.
Yeah.
So as much as I want to continue and probe you on the current chapter you're
We'll
in
do a
with
part
energy,
two for the current chapter.
with the energy healing. But actually, I think what I would tell to those listening is actually just to follow your social media, because a lot of this section where you're currently in with energy healing is something you share a
Yeah,
lot on your social media.
absolutely. Yeah.
And uh, I just need to ask you three quick questions before we wrap up, because that's
Before
usually
before
how.
you do, I just want to be really quick about talking about energy, and about
Okay.
this. It's again one of those terms that we really like to make complicated.
Yeah.
Energy means just the way you feel. This is what it is. It's about the way that you feel, and how can you feel better. How can you
Mm,
feel better in your body every day? How can you be more satisfied? How can you be more chronically satisfied? No matter where you are, no matter what you do, how can you get yourself hyped up and feel vibrant, magnetic, really, really
yeah.
good?
So
That's what
like
energy
some
works is about.
people get hyped up energy, if we want to use energy, by
Yeah,
economic gastronomic food and having a
absolutely.
nice glass of
Some people
wine,
that we
right?
know. Yeah.
People that we know,
Exactly.
economic traveler. And,
Yeah.
some people maybe really get a high and a good feel good when they have good sexual energy with their partner, so it just
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
depends on the individual and knowing
Yes.
yourself individually to know what actually is your feel good,
Yeah.
right?
And not judging yourself compared to other people and their journey.
Yeah,
Right. So if you are enjoying a certain experience, a gastronomic experience, do not judge people who don't understand food,
understand it.
or
Yeah, yeah,
or who don't understand how possibly can you do what you're doing,
right.
or consider yourself better or worse based on what others are doing. So it's such a unique imprint of what we all come with, these inner guidance systems that tells us this feels good, do more of it. this doesn't feel good, don't do this anymore, or do less of it, or change. And so if we all are to just trust that inner pull towards what makes us feel good, we would all be so much happier. And this is what I'm doing with my journey with Light of Key. It is Palo Santo, of course, it is spiritual tools, of course, but it is also this trying to rewrite the narrative about spiritual practice doesn't look the same for everybody. And you can have a spiritual practice by driving, or by washing dishes, or by going to a gastronomic event, or whatever, or by having sex, or by reading a good book. And it's all the same, and it's all good, and it's all perfect. There's no
Mm-hmm.
need to just overthink this, or think that you need to sit in a moon ceremony, or do sound salutations, or chant, or do whatever other people are doing. I just want everybody to normalize that their spiritual experience, the experience that they have with their energy, with the way that they feel, their vibration, is so personal, and it's perfect the way it is.
Very
And
well
that's your
said.
questions.
Yes, now to my questions. Okay, so it's three questions. What keeps you grounded? What 2 cent would you give those who are listening to this episode who resonate with your story? Kind of like a Talida's 2 cent. Or you can even say, what would you tell your younger self what you know now? And
Yeah,
the third one is, I know you also read a lot and you listen to a lot of podcasts. What resources would you share with us today that you think have been very helpful for you? Earlier,
yeah,
you mentioned a few already. You said The
yeah,
Secret,
yeah,
Oprah Daily Show. And yeah, so those are the three
yeah.
questions. Oh.
Well, okay. So, sorry, repeat to me again the first question.
What keeps you grounded?
What keeps me grounded? What keeps me grounded? Um, um, well, the first thing that actually came to my mind is quite spooky. Actually, mortality keeps me grounded. Thinking that this is an experience, that being in this body, doing this life right now, here with you, here in this world, it's very limited. We get very little time to do life. What keeps me grounded is knowing that this is it. This is the life that I get to live, and I want to live it well, and I want to live it fully, and I want to live it to what I think is a beautiful life. And so, what
Mm,
keeps me grounded is the idea that it's all very short and quick, and I better enjoy it. Um,
mm,
my kids keep me grounded. My husband keeps me grounded. This beautiful country keeps me grounded. I feel so anchored in this land, and so these are all just feelings, but it's what works for me.
mm,
Um, my 2 cents. Oh wow, what I would tell to my younger self. I think what everybody would tell their younger self: just chill. Everything is fine. It's all just be more playful, be more light, just enjoy life more. It's all good. It's all fine. It's all good. And as for your last questions for the resources, actually, it's really funny that you're mentioning that. I did mention The Secret and the Oprah Daily Show, and I I have to confess that I no longer read nonfiction. I have stopped reading nonfiction about a year ago, when I realized that I was using it as an excuse to not feel complete and to not feel good enough. And so I have stopped um, any sort of personal development reading, because it made me feel that there are just things to fix about myself. Instead, I'm more now looking for things that make me feel really good. So I'm
mm.
currently only reading fiction. So I cannot I cannot say anything about resources other than read a novel that makes you feel really good.
Well, what's the current novel you're reading?
Oh, current novel. I am reading this series called A Court of Thorn and Roses. It's
Okay.
by this author called Sarah J. Maas, Maas. And it's all a fantasy novel. It happens in a fantasy world that doesn't exist, on a different planet, people who are having different experiences. Um, So yeah, that's what I'm reading. Fairies and magical creatures and courts that are doing.
Okay.
So that's what I love doing now. Just
Okay.
basking in pleasure of just being in another world sometimes.
And podcasts, because I know you listen to lots of podcasts too. So what's
I
your
do listen to a lot
like?
of podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take a look. All right, let me see. What is on my podcast list? Give me a moment. Except for Curito Connect. Let's see. So I am listening to Abraham Hicks
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Let me see. A bit of optimism. Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. I love it. And a parenting podcast, if you are into that, it's called Good Inside with
Okay.
Dr. Becky. That would be about the highlights of and the Tim Ferriss show, which was such a big influence for me in my personal development and everything else.
Thank you. I will
Thank you,
put
Jenn, for
all of
having
that
me.
information. Yeah, I'll put all that information in the episode resources guide. And you have been very kind to give the Curito audience a little discount for shopping on Light of Key. So I'll provide that discount code as well. And yes, you have to run. So I am going to close off here and just really thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jenn. Thank you for having me. It was such a blast. Such a blast.
Bye.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.